We're off the rails. Now we are trains ourselves. No wait and see.
Hello and welcome to this, our third lesson on Rails mastery. Here we're looking at migrations. And essentially, migrations are Ruby classes that extend active record migration. We have a file with a timestamp, year, month, day, hour, minute, second, and that's followed by the name of the class. The migration name is stored in a schema migrations directory in the database, and this timestamp defines the sequence of migration application. So it's like a snapshot of our database at a certain point of time. The advantages are that it's agile, it allows for rapid changes to the database, and also migrations allow us to represent SQL commands with Ruby. So they act as a kind of wrapper for all of these different types of SQL commands. So for SQL, we've got DDL within SQL, which is our structured query language. We have DDL, data definition language, how data should reside in the database with commands like create, alter, drop, truncate, comment, and rename. We have data manipulation language, which modifies the data in the database, select, insert, update, etc. We've got data control language for rights, permissions, and controls, and transaction control as well. Most of our migrations are concerned particularly with DDL, our data definition language, and how the data should reside. So we can alter our tables using the migrations, Rails migrations. So an example migration file would look like this. We've got our class create books, which is inheriting from active record migration, and we have a method called change within that. So this is held within migrate within our DB file, our DB folder. And the change method allows for adding columns, amongst others, and other commands, which we look at below. And we can also use up and down methods, although they're a bit rarer, because they can specify exactly what we want the migration to do. Change is a bit simpler. We can create a table, for instance, and that is a create table on the books table. And we have, for each column, we've got string for the title, string for the author, and an integer for the year. And then we also add our timestamps for the automatically created at and updated at columns, which are added through Rails. Other change commands could include add column, add index, change column, change table, create table, drop table, remove column, remove index, and rename column. So all of these are allowing us to alter or use that SQL is wrapping around our SQL to change our database. So migration creation can take place manually, and we have to remember that the name of the file needs to be the year, the month, the day, the hour, the minute, and the second, and then create books RB. That's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? So often we create them through Rails generate, so Rails G migration, and then we have to give a different class name for each of our migrations. So add description to books would be a possible name for a migration, and description string. So we're adding a description column there. Migrations need to have different class names, as I mentioned, and we would use rake db migrate to apply our migrations in the db migrate folder. So, as I mentioned, the Ruby within the migration can act as a wrapper for our database interaction. So the Ruby terms on the left, binary, boolean, date, date time, decimal, float, integer, string, text, time, and timestamp, take the place of different, all the possible data types that we can have within, for instance, PostgreSQL, SQLite, SQL Server, and Sybase. So our Ruby language in the migration file is acting as an interface for our SQL interaction, and it means we can use the same commands for all of these different types of database. Other column options could include null, true, or false, and that decides whether to allow null as a column entry, otherwise it would be false within our entry. And we can have limit size, so we can manually set the max size for the column, how much text we want in there. We can also have default with a value that sets a default value for the column, but that can only be sent once. We can't change that once we've done it once. So decimal columns as well, we can use precision value for the number of digits, the number as a whole. So for instance, minus 999.99 would be 5 digits. And scale, the number of digits after the decimal point. So for instance, for 999.99, that would be a scale of 2. So we've learned that migrations are Ruby classes that act as an interface for database interaction. We've also learned that schema migrations keep a record of the last migration so that there's no duplication.